In 2019, LeBron James finally missed the playoffs, and it seemed like for once the title of best player in the NBA was left wide open. Most people figured it was going to be taken by either Steph Curry or Kevin Durant, but for my money, after his absurd playoff run, the best player in the world in 2019 was Kawhi Leonard. He had an all-time great playoff run, all-time great series against the Sixers and the Bucks to make the finals, and he won the title for Toronto. The first time in history the Toronto Raptors have won an NBA title. Then, of course, the next year came around, LeBron James came back, he won the finals again with Anthony Davis, and it seemed to be locked up who the best player in the world was. LeBron proved himself once again, like he does seemingly every time he's been doubted, that he was the best player in the league. And then this year came. LeBron James got a year older, his team faced some injuries, and they lost in the first round. And even though LeBron did play well, he didn't quite play as well as we have come to expect from playoff LeBron James. And I know he was injured, he was struggling with an ankle injury, but at the end of the day, you can only give a player credit for what they actually do. And what LeBron actually did was underperform pretty badly by his own standards in the 2021 playoffs against the Phoenix Suns. He was incredibly lazy coming back on defense, he shot very badly from the field, for his standards anyway, he wasn't that aggressive, and he just didn't look like the LeBron James we have all come to know, this dominant, unstoppable player. So now, once again, until LeBron, inevitably, it seems, re-earns the title next season, we have to ask, who is the best player in the NBA? Many people believe it to be Steph Curry, and I cannot fault anyone who thinks that the man is an absolute fucking monster. However, he just missed the playoffs, and very rarely does a player who missed the playoffs get that title. It usually comes from some incredible playoff performances. That's what solidifies a player as the best. Luka Doncic just had an all-time great series against the Clippers. Even though he did lose, he had some ridiculous freaking stats. Nikola Jokic has been going off, Joel Embiid has played very well, he just played very well last night. Hell, even Trae Young has been something of a monster so far these playoffs, and even though I certainly wouldn't go as far as to call him the best player in the NBA, he has very much made it a conversation as for whether or not he is at least a top 5 point guard, and maybe even I'd go as far as to say a superstar. The kid's been balling. But the one player who is always under the radar, who always gets slept on in MVP conversations because he rests games and he doesn't try as hard in the regular season, it's Kawhi Leonard. And I'm not saying he is the best player, but I'm saying he has a chance, a very real chance, to prove once again that he is the best player in the entire NBA if he can carry this Clippers team to the NBA Finals. Let me explain. It may sound ridiculous at first when I say carry, because he plays with another star in Paul George, doesn't he? Isn't this an elite defensive team? Isn't this a team with elite shooting, with a bunch of elite role players? Isn't this an amazing team around Kawhi Leonard? On paper, yes. Yes, it is. In reality, no. No, it is not. Paul George may be an all-star level talent, but he is absolutely not the superstar number 2 option that a guy like Anthony Davis is, okay? Paul George had a pretty good series against the Mavericks. He averaged 24 points, 6 assists was pretty nice, but his defense was suspect. He could not do anything against Luka, or even Tim Hardaway Jr. was going off on him. His defense just wasn't that great. He couldn't hit his threes, and at this point, we know that Paul George just isn't that great of a playoff performer. He seems to underperform every single season. You can't expect him to play at an elite level in the playoffs. You're going to be disappointed every single time. Reggie Jackson was pretty good, but he's a terrible defender, and he's not the world's greatest playmaker for a point guard. However, he's still better than Patrick Beverley, who was just straight up garbage in that series. His efficiency was okay on offense, but his defense, that's supposed to be his big thing because he's a dog on defense, he was getting humiliated by Luka Doncic, or whoever the hell he was supposed to be guarding, on the Dallas Mavericks. I don't know if it's because he's still recovering from his injury, or what, but he is clearly not the all-defensive first-team player he's supposed to be. Zubac was played right off the floor, and any center who's able to shoot is going to do the same thing, whether it be... I'm actually not sure who they'd end up playing. Whether they play Nikola Jokic in, the conference finals, or they play somebody out of the East, like Joel Embiid, or whoever the Nets have, he's going to get played right off the floor, alright? Terrence Mann is a decent role player, but he's Terrence Mann. He's a nobody. Sorry, he's not going to be the difference maker for your team. Rajon Rondo was an absolute bum, and same thing as Patrick Beverley, supposed to be a great defender, he just wasn't. Nicholas Batum could not hit a three to save his life in that series, although he did have some good moments, and Marcus Morris can hit threes, but he does literally nothing else, it seems. So the rest of this team has pieces of a good team in there, but they're just not all coming together. Meanwhile, Kawhi Leonard went out, and he carried this team. 32, 8, and 5, along with 2 steals and a block, and he did that on 61, 43, 90% shooting. Now, I know the Mavericks' defense is not the greatest thing in the world. It's not. They are not known as a great defensive team. But Kawhi Leonard is going to have a chance to have these kind of series against whoever else he may play, whether it be the Nuggets, the Jazz, or even the Suns. As good as they are, and they are a good defense, Mikal Bridges is not going to be locking down Kawhi Leonard by any means. If this team is going to make the finals, which they do have a legitimate chance to do, it's going to be because Kawhi Leonard absolutely balls out, just like he did in 2019. Now, I'm going to say this right now. I do not think that any team who comes out of the West is winning the finals. I believe whichever of the East's big three comes out of the Eastern Conference, and yes, I said big three. I know the Hawks won the first game against the Sixers. Don't expect that series to go past 6 games. The Sixers are definitely winning, okay? Sorry, Hawks fans. I know you're a really good team, but as long as Joel Embiid is playing like he did last night, the Sixers are going to get it together. I'm just calling it right now. 6-game series. Trust me on that. But that's not what we're talking about right now. If the Clippers can make the finals, even though they're probably going to lose because the team around them is just not as good as the teams coming out of the East, Kawhi Leonard can play well enough to establish himself as the best player in the NBA. He still has that level of potential. Look how good he was. If he plays against the Jazz, he's going to do the exact same thing, whether it's Mitchell or Bojan or... I don't know, who else do they have on the Jazz? Like Joe Ingles guarding him? None of those guys are going to be able to shut down Kawhi Leonard. On the Suns, he's going to bully Mikal Bridges. Mikal Bridges is a very good defender, but he is not experienced enough or strong enough to fully stop Kawhi Leonard, and nobody else in that team is either. If he plays against the Nuggets, again, don't have the talent. Freaking Aaron Gordon, he's a very good defender, but he's just not able to keep up with Kawhi. Kawhi is very, very good. He's more talented. He's not going to be shut down by Aaron Gordon. However, some of these matchups can be challenging, so it is going to still be impressive if Kawhi can put up these crazy best player in the league numbers. The other important thing for Kawhi is his defense. In that Mavs series, when they went down 0-2 to the Mavericks, I said Kawhi Leonard needs to fucking guard Luka Doncic, and this is what everyone else who's a basketball fan said as well. He needs to be the one guarding Luka Doncic, and if you look at the stats for the series, the Clippers started winning games when they stopped giving up every single switch to Luka Doncic. He'd bully Patrick Beverley, he'd bully anyone taller than him, especially Zubac, he'd bully Reggie Jackson, and he even had his way against Paul George. The one player who held him to human numbers was Kawhi Leonard. I've been saying this for the last several years now, but especially since he reached the Clippers. He is not the all-defensive first-team defensive player of the year level guy that he was back on the Spurs, and I think he was even still close to that on the Raptors. He's just not that guy anymore. He's been slowed down due to injuries and due to age, and he's just not quite able to clamp up the very best players in the NBA like he used to. Like he clamped up LeBron James in 2014, or he clamped up everybody when he won his Defensive Player of the Year awards. However, he is still one of the best defenders in the entire NBA when he tries, and when he guarded Luka Doncic, he held him to by far his worst shooting and scoring percentages of the series. Compared to anyone else, it wasn't even close. Kawhi guarded him much, much better than anybody else did. He's going to need to do that in these playoffs. He's going to need to do it against Donovan Mitchell, and then he's going to need to do it. He's going to need to do it against either Devin Booker or Michael Porter Jr. And if they make the finals, he's going to need to be doing it against guys like Giannis, like Kevin Durant, like Tobias Harris. He's going to need to lock up these other star-level players if the Clippers even have a chance to make a competitive finals series. I think Kawhi Leonard has potential to do it. I don't know if he's going to. This next series, I believe they're about to start playing the Jazz. I'm very, very excited to see what Kawhi does. I think he's going to eat against the Jazz perimeter defense, and I can't wait. I can't wait to see what Kawhi Leonard does. Maybe I should hate him as a Sixers fan, and in a way I do. I hate him for knocking us out, but I also kind of like him. I like the way he plays. I like the fact that he didn't go to the Lakers and create another unstoppable super team. Kevin Durant, bitch ass. I like Kawhi Leonard. I like watching him play, and I'm very excited to see what he does in this playoffs. I think he was unfairly slandered for his underperformance last year. Yes, he choked in Game 7, but people ignore the fact that he carried his team in Game 5 and Game 6, and they still lost. It didn't matter that he was having high 30-point games on good efficiency. The rest of his team sucked, and they lost, and people slandered Kawhi for it anyway. Then he had one bad Game 7, and all of a sudden, he's an absolute playoff joker. Absolutely ridiculous. I can't wait to see Kawhi Leonard and what he does in the rest of this series, even if I really don't like the rest of his team. Can't wait for the second round of the NBA playoffs in the Western Conference. And yeah, that's all I've got for you. Don't underestimate Kawhi Leonard. He might be the best player in the league.